Hello everyone, this is Dr. Houck with a discussion of the Module 2 assignment. Once again, you'll certainly want to have your hard copy in front of you so you can check over your answers. So there were 2 units here in this module, one on biomedicine, the other on traditional tribal healing. All right, let's take it from the top. Number 1, according to a practitioner of homeopathic medicine, the correct answer is C. The body should be allowed to naturally heal itself. It's almost as if they encourage the symptoms to quote-unquote do their thing, because that's the body healing itself, which, as you know, is the opposite of what allopathy requests that we do. So 1 is C for homeopathy. Number 2. Which of the following is most important in regard to empiricism? That would be sense experience, because in fact that's what empiricism involves. It involves basically measuring our sensory experience of the universe through the various instruments that we use. So 2 is D. Number 3, which would not be considered cultural knowledge? Well, that would be A. Hopefully that didn't cause you too much of an issue. Newton's laws of motion are recognized everywhere. Number 4, which of the following would not be associated with cultural knowledge? Well, that would be D, objectivity. Now that would be associated with universal knowledge, but certainly not with cultural knowledge. Number 5, in the Middle Ages, rubbing snail juice on the eyes was thought to be a cure for blindness. D. Number 6, Ernest Gellner is a proponent of A, Enlightenment rationalist fundamentalism. That's stated right out in his work, so you should have found that without too much of an issue. So 1 through 6 is C, D, A, D, D, A. All right, 7 through 11. The Black Death, or the Black Plague as it was called in the Middle Ages, was attributed at that time to B, sin and immoral behavior. That would account for the behavior of the so-called flagellants who roamed around in these huge groups of individuals beating themselves with ropes and chains. So number 7 is B. Number 8, which of the following is most important if psychotherapeutic healing is to take place? Well, for psychotherapeutic healing to take place, you need everyone to be on the same page. So using that as your starting point, D would be the answer. The patient's confidence in the healer's abilities. Number 9, Koro is attributed to an imbalance in the yin-yang, C. A cosmic imbalance, basically. So 9 is C. Number 10, which of the following behaviors, activities would not be considered anti-structural? Well, that shouldn't have been too difficult, especially if you completed the reading on shamanism. That's A, having a family and raising children. That should sound fairly ordinary, and it is. It is structural, quote-unquote. 10 is A. And number 11, during which of the 6 stages of Catholic exorcism does the evil entity manifest itself? Now, please note that's from a sort of believer's perspective, obviously. But nevertheless, the answer would be D, from the believer's perspective, during the breakpoint. Okay, true-false. Number 12, biomedicine is strictly empirical and strictly scientific? No. It's very much so, those things, but not strictly. As Hahn points out, all types of medicine and healing are somewhat cultural. Now you might argue that biomedicine is the least cultural form of medicine, and that would be fine. But as worded, though, it's false. So 12 is false. 13, objectivity is an important part of universal knowledge. Well, yes, of course. Without objectivity, we can't have what we call universal knowledge. In other words, global knowledge that's shared by everyone. Number 14, if, by the way, a claim or a statement is not falsifiable, then that just means just that, right? It means that, we quote unquote, we can't get to it. No matter how we approach it from a database perspective, we can't come to any sort of resolution. So, as I like to say, it sort of hangs out there in an ether of uncertainty. We just can't know. So you certainly can't claim it's false or true, for that matter. So the statement as written is false. 14, false. 15, that is true. Science is constantly engaged in attempts to falsify itself, and that is true. Theories are being altered and retested and adjusted and fine-tuned all the time. That's what science does. And that's one of the things that makes science so reliable. Number 16, cultural knowledge transcends cultural boundaries. Well, no, that should have sounded a little odd, because otherwise it wouldn't be cultural if it transcended cultural boundaries. Right? It would be universal. So that's false. And number 17, that is true according to the passage in Gellner's book that you read for this module. Religious fundamentalists are definitely not relativist. And so, in other words, well, they're not relativists, so I forgot what I just said, but 17 is true. The statement as worded is true. They're not relativist. All right, 18. Anthropologists reject the idea that spirits can cause sickness. Well, yes, anthropologists reject the idea that spirits do anything. It's basically a non-starter. The reason being, in fact, there's a very good reason, it's not a very elegant and very robust solution for anything. There are many more other mundane solutions that are much more satisfactory for virtually all of these phenomena. So we see no reason to invoke spirits as an explanation for anything. So that would be true, 18. Number 19, according to the anthropological understanding of psychotherapeutic healing, that's psychotherapeutic healing, any exorcist from any culture could conduct a successful exorcism anywhere? Well, no. If you understand psychotherapeutic healing, you will know, as I mentioned a while ago, that the healer and the patient have to be on the same page culturally and ideologically. So this would be false, as stated. Number 21, no, the shamans in the old world tend to use percussion and jumping and dancing and clapping and things like that. It's in the new world where they use psychoactive substances. So that's false. Number 22, that is true. That is a form of ethnomedicine. It certainly falls outside the boundaries of biomedicine. Number 23, this is true. The Catholic Church today believes that dissociative behavior that some consider symptomatic of demon possession can best be dealt with by psychiatrists and psychologists rather than exorcists. And the Catholic Church actually takes pains to avoid invoking exorcists and exorcisms at any time they can. That they stress the need to see a psychiatrist, to see a psychologist, because, I mean, from their grasp of history, it's become more and more obvious to them that they're dealing primarily with some sort of psychiatric or psychological abnormality rather than some sort of spiritual issue. So that's true. And number 24, the woman in the exorcism in India video thought to be possessed was healed when the holy man successfully exorcised the demonic spirit. Well, that's false, because as you know, that holy man, quote unquote, was a fake, just to prove a point. So he didn't exorcise anything. He was play acting. But that was enough to make the woman feel as if she had been healed. A classic case of psychotherapeutic healing. If you ever wonder how powerful psychotherapeutic healing is, how effective it is, just watch that video, and that'll tell you. So 24 is false. 25, geocentrism. the idea that the earth is the center of the universe. Geocentrism. Number 26, fraternal polyandry. It's a special type of marriage we find in Nepal and Tibet. That's north of India. Fraternal polyandry. A woman marries a man and his brothers. 27, animism, A-N-I-M-I-S-M. 28, sorcery. 29, the Bodhi tree. Bodhi is the Sanskrit term for enlightenment. So the enlightenment tree, in other words, the Bodhi tree, B-O-D-H-I tree. Number 30 is the Hekura. Hekura, H-E-K-U-R-A. Allopathy. The basic idea here is that sickness is caused by an invading agent. In other words, sickness is independent of the individual, and it needs to be rooted out, it needs to be cut out, it needs to be treated in some kind of way. So basically, it involves eliminating symptoms. So it's the opposite of homeopathy. And of course, you didn't have to explain it just like that. I will read what you said. Knowledge beyond culture. This is culture that is shared globally. Sorry, back up. This is knowledge that is shared globally and universally by everyone. In other words, objective knowledge. Examples would be scientific knowledge, mathematics, etc. The rule of falsifiability is quite simply assertions that are not falsifiable are meaningless. Our claims that are not falsifiable are meaningless. Now remember, they're speaking of meaninglessness in a philosophical context. It doesn't mean they're dumb and stupid and goofy. It just means that they're nonsensical in the sort of philosophical sense of the term. Okay? The Leech Book of Bald. This is a book of remedies written in the 13th century. It was full of specific sort of methods for healing, knowledge of plants and healing, things of that nature. Shamanistic cosmology. You will find that in the paper that I wrote on shamanism that was assigned for this module. First of all, cosmology is a description of the universe, right? So this would be a shamanistic description. The universe, first of all, is multi-layered, and it's parallel. So in other words, there are many, many layers all parallel to one another. And then secondly, they're all connected by some sort of conduit. And finally, the earth is in one of those intermediary positions. Not very high, not very low. Natima, this is used by the Jivaro people. J-I-V-A-R-O. Jivaro. And it's a classic entheogen is what it's called. You have to know that word. It causes, unless that word comes up in some other unit, I can't remember, but it causes a trance state that's necessary for shamanism. So it's a drink that causes a trance state necessary for shamanism. The Pasuk, these are spirit helpers for Jivaro shaman. You see how specific that is? When you're writing your definitions, make sure your definition is not so general it can actually be describing something else. So if you just stop at spirit helper, that would not be very specific and very concise. Right? So spirit helper for Jivaro shaman. Okay, that's good. That's the only thing it can be. Okay, 38. Short answers. Biomedicine is said to be individualistic. What does that mean? Well, it means that there's a focus on the individual in isolation from the broader social, cultural context in which they're found. So that's probably the simplest and most elegant way to describe it. So once again, there's a focus on the individual, but in isolation from their social and cultural context. 39, one common allopathic treatment for headache, aspirin, Tylenol, whatever, anything along those lines. Number 40, which part of this is induction? Well, the induction part is the first part, when a scientist collects data on planetary motion and uses that data to create a theory. That part is the induction part. Number 41, state an example of a claim that is falsifiable. And what that means is that data can be brought to bear to resolve the issue. Okay, so here's a claim that's falsifiable. The earth is flat. Now, we know that is wrong, but however, the question is whether or not it's falsifiable. Sure, that's easily falsifiable. In fact, the Greek name Eratosthenes did it some 3,000 years ago. So we've known for a long time the earth is not flat. But nevertheless, data can be brought to bear. So the earth is flat is an example of a claim that is falsifiable. For that matter, you can say the earth is round. Actually, it's an oblate spheroid, but we won't quibble. The earth is round. Okay, that's falsifiable. In other words, we can check that. Data can be brought to bear. Okay, I think you get the point there. Lots of easy answers for that one. And then the converse applies in the next question, 42. State an example of a claim that is not falsifiable. Now, what does that mean? Well, any claim for which data cannot be brought to bear to resolve the issue one way or the other. So, for example, a person claims that everyone from birth is guided by an invisible guardian angel. Period. Well, I mean, you can claim that. It might work for you. Maybe it doesn't work for you, depending on your spiritual taste. But one thing you can't do is document it or prove it one way or the other. So it's one of those claims you just go, well, okay, well, that's kind of interesting, but I prefer not to accept it, or someone else, yeah, that's what I was taught and I do accept it. But important point being, no data can be brought to bear on the issue. Okay? And then, of course, I will read what you had to say. There's almost an infinite number of answers for both 41 and 42, you understand. And I will check what you wrote. Okay, 43, I was giving you specific examples. 43, one purely symbolic aspect of biomedicine. There's a few you could choose from. The white coats was mentioned. This is in the Kinsley textbook. The use of Latin when writing prescriptions. Also, too, I think Kinsley mentioned the routine physicals. In other words, even when you're not sick, you get a routine physical. All these things represent sort of the purely symbolic cultural aspect of biomedicine. 43, the downstream approach of Chinese medicine. It starts by looking at the entire body to find signs and symptoms, and from that gives them clues regarding what's happening. So you can see why they call it the downstream approach. So it's almost as if you're looking at the after effects. So you're looking at the signs and symptoms, and from that you get clues regarding what's happening inside the body, and then they will go on and treat the symptoms. But the important part is the first part there. Okay, number 45, on page 85, I'll try to help you here, give you the exact page. Page 85 of the Gilmer reading, he points out that religious fundamentalists and relativists are in conflict. What is the source of that conflict? Well, relativists don't accept the fundamentalist claim of privileged knowledge. Because the relativists would point out, well, if we're talking privileged knowledge, there are 10,500 different religions. So in other words, there are 10,500 religious quote-unquote truths out there. And that will always remain the source of conflict between relativists and the fundamentalists. And of course, you could explain it in a different way, but that's the basic gist of the issue. 46, moving into the questions regarding traditional tribal healing. 46 would be spirit intrusion. 47 would be breach of a taboo. 48, state the one ability shamans have that other religious functionaries do not have. Well, this is all from believers' perspective, but from that perspective, from the Emic natives' perspective, shamans claim to actually be able to enter the spirit world and have a real audience with beings in the spirit world. Other religious functionaries like sorcerers and priests and whatever don't make that claim. Number 49, explain how witchcraft in North Central Africa functions as a means of social control. Well, as soon as witchcraft is alleged for some incident, a short list of names is compiled and people are tested. Now, who makes the short list? Well, people who are suspicious. People who are known for transgressing social norms, etc. And no one wants to be shamed publicly like that. So people want to avoid being called out. And so that is how it functions as a means of social control. Number 50, from an emic perspective. In other words, this is from the natives' point of view. What's the most obvious way to cure cysto? Well, cysto, the emic etiology of cysto says it's due to the loss of the soul. Well, there's really only one answer: return the soul. That's it. Okay? Number 51, the primary purpose of the shamanistic initiation ritual is to create an anti-structural person. And that is stressed in that reading. Because remember, this is a person, a very special person, who has to be sort of superhuman, because they're going to actually be stepping into the spirit world and acting on behalf of everyone else. So we want someone special, someone quote-unquote superhuman, someone anti-structural. And the shamanistic initiation ritual produces that kind of person. 52, how do they test whether or not they still have enough power? Well, the shaman will bewitch a tree, and a powerful tsinsak will split the tree. And that's how they know they still have their power. That's only visible to the shamans, by the way, under the influence of Natima. Number 53, sorry about the typo there. It should be what do they mean by that. Has to do with confirmation bias. Confirmation bias just really means that you have a pet theory and you see it realized everywhere you look. That's kind of what that involves. So in this case, the answer to the question would be that evangelical exorcists, they basically interpret all episodes of dissociation as demonic possession. So every time there's dissociation, spirit possession type behavior, they immediately jump right in with the demon possession diagnosis. Okay, number 54. I had to find my notes here. Number 54, refer to the chart in Module 3, Part 1. That's disregard that Module 3 comment there. I probably should have fixed that. I hope you weren't too confused. That contrast biomedicine and ethnomedicine. Choose three, only three of the contrasts. State them and elaborate on the meaning of the contrast. So find three of them. That really wasn't too difficult. They're all right there. And state what they are. Now I need you to write these in terms of contrast. So for example, biomedicine is allopathic versus ethnomedicine, which is allopathic and homeopathic. Biomedicine is mechanistic versus ethnomedicine, which is holistic. A few others. The former is secular, whereas the other is spiritual and somewhat secular. For one, disease is ontological. For the other, disease is culturally organic. One is highly empirical. The other is highly traditional and somewhat empirical. Anyway, so I need to compare and contrast, and I need you to comment on what they mean and the significance of those. Okay? So there were lots to choose from there. 7 or 8 different ones. Okay, and finally, the last question, number 55. Describe the anthropological perspective of exorcism as psychotherapeutic healing. And yes, I am expecting a thorough discussion of this issue since it was covered extensively in the materials. And this is important in this course because psychotherapeutic healing is a very important aspect of ethnomedical healing. Well, we can start by addressing the we can start by noting that exorcism is not therapeutic. Why is it not therapeutic? Well, we have history that can help us with this issue. In other words, the further back we go in history, the more people are inclined to invoke the demon possession diagnosis. Or conversely, as we move closer to today, people become less inclined to invoke the demon possession hypothesis because we frankly understand more today than we used to. Back at a time when things such as Tourette's and epilepsy were thought to be caused by demonic possession. And then, of course, that is the primary reason why the church has grown very suspicious and wary suspicious of the diagnosis and very careful about using exorcism. Also, too, there are way too many explanations out there. I mean, there are 10,500 different religions. Thousands of those have their own exorcism rituals. And by the way, they are all particular to their understanding of their particular spirit world. And they can't all be correct. Then we also have to deal with enculturation. Frankly, some people are almost indoctrinated to believe certain things. And that is how they see the world. So enculturation is an important issue here. Also, too, exorcism, as anthropologists point out, always works, quote unquote. No matter which culture you go to, everyone's exorcism ritual seems to work. But why does it work? Well, the fake holy man in India gave us a clue. As long as you dress up the rituals enough with the right bells and whistles and you act the part of the authority and so forth, that's usually enough for exorcism to quote-unquote work. So these are a lot of reasons why anthropologists see exorcism as therapeutic. Here's another major reason, the placebo effect, which involves positive expectations leading to positive outcomes. People definitely have positive expectations even before this ceremony begins. And then they're very impressive. With everything that goes on, you have some people in positions of authority, and they're invoking an ancient tradition. It's very impressive. And so the expectation is high that healing will occur. So the placebo effect is important. So yeah, there is healing. It's not denied, but the healing itself is psychotherapeutic, which tells us, the anthropologist that is, that there was never a spirit issue to begin with, because psychotherapeutic healing has nothing to do with exorcising spirits.